James Thornton was the kind of man everyone liked but never talked much about. A quiet, reliable presence. The man who showed up early to work, paid bills on time, kissed his wife on the forehead each morning, and never raised his voice. His life was built on predictability. And that's what made the unraveling so terrifying. Because it didn't come in a sudden explosion, not with flashing lights or gunshots or screams. It came slowly, like a fog creeping under the door. A headache that wouldn't go away. A strange metallic taste in his mouth. A heaviness in his limbs that no amount of rest could lift. It started with fatigue. Then came the confusion. Missed appointments. Words that slipped away mid-sentence. A fog behind his eyes that turned familiar faces into shadows. His doctor ran every test. MRI, blood work, even neurological screenings. But everything came back clean. Stress, they said. Maybe early onset depression. But James knew his body. He knew something was wrong. What he didn't know was that the danger wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from across the dinner table. Vanessa Thornton, his wife of 17 years, was beautiful, composed, and always present. She was there during doctor visits. There with hot tea and gentle reassurance. There where he fell asleep and when he woke up feeling even worse. Everyone said she was a perfect wife, but the truth was darker. She wasn't nursing him back to health. She was quietly, methodically killing him. At first, it was just a plan. A thought she tucked away between yoga classes and PDA meetings. But that thought grew louder after she met Owen. Young, bold, reckless. Everything James wasn't. Their affair was a flame in the dark. And flames, Vanessa had learned, require oxygen. James was suffocating her. Not because he was cruel, but because he still loved her. And love, in her world, had become inconvenient. Divorce would be messy, embarrassing, financially disastrous. But death, that came with sympathy, with silence, and most importantly, insurance. $1 million policy, signed years ago, still active, waiting. So she smiled as she stirred his tea, held his hand while he trembled, cooked his meals and seasoned them with silence and a little something else. The poison was slow, carefully measured, undetectable in low doses. It was perfect. At night, she whispered, "I love you," and kissed his forehead. And James, weak and afraid, but still desperate to believe in her goodness, closed his eyes and fell deeper into the darkness she was creating. No one suspected a thing. Not yet. Not the neighbors who waved from their driveways. Not the friends who visited once a month. Not even Lily, their daughter, who sat at the same table and watched her father grow smaller every day. To everyone, James was just a man under stress, a man fighting some invisible illness. But the truth was sitting in plain sight, wearing lipstick, smiling, stirring tea. And behind that smile, Vanessa was counting the days, waiting for the moment the man she had once vowed to love would finally, quietly die. Vanessa Thornton had mastered the art of pretending. Every movement was precise, every smile practiced, every sigh of worry over James's declining health delivered with such quiet sincerity that no one questioned it. She cried in public just enough, took photos of his medications, asked concerned questions at the doctor's office, even brought soup to his bedside with a spoonful of poison hidden between the carrots. But behind closed doors, she wasn't a wife at war with disease. She was a woman on a timeline. She had done the research. Hours spent in anonymous forums, deep web searches, and private browser tabs. She learned about thallium, an odorless, tasteless heavy metal, once used in rat poison, now nearly impossible to detect in modern toxicology unless you knew to look for it. The perfect killer. It would attack the nervous system slowly, mimic 100 other conditions. And best of all, it was legal in certain forms of purchase for laboratory use. Vanessa found a supplier, used a fake name, a burner email, paid in crypto. When the first bottle arrived, she stared at it for a long time. It didn't look like death, just a clear liquid, innocent, silent. She slipped it into James's tea that night. A few drops, just a test. The next morning, he vomited, blamed it on stress. She offered to make him herbal tea, something gentler on your stomach. He thanked her, kissed her hand, and drank. As weeks passed, James declined further. He lost weight. His hair thinned. He could barely stand some days without trembling. Vanessa watched carefully, adjusting the dosage, balancing his decline just right. She couldn't kill him too quickly. That would draw suspicion. It had to look natural, like the body giving up. But James wasn't completely blind. Something gnawed at him, a question he couldn't shake. He started refusing meals at random, started making his own toast, started watching her more closely when she poured his drinks. One evening, as he sipped chamomile tea, his eyes met hers across the rim of the cup, and for the briefest moment, she saw it, doubt, suspicion, but he said nothing, just smiled weakly and whispered, "Thanks, sweetheart." That night, she increased the dose, just a little, enough to send him into a daze for hours, enough to weaken whatever resolve was building in his mind. She was winning, slowly, quietly. James's body became a roadmap of failure. His hands shook uncontrollably. He couldn't write without trembling, could barely eat without gagging. His doctor referred him to a specialist. Tests again, always inconclusive. Vanessa stayed close through it all, holding his hand in waiting rooms, tucking blankets around him at night, all while texting Owen under the sheets. "He's fading, not much longer." Owen responded with hearts and promises. A new life was waiting, far from this sick house, far from the man who still breathed, barely, in the room down the hall. But what neither of them realized was that James wasn't as helpless as he seemed. He couldn't speak the truth out loud yet, but he had found another way, one that would make sure the truth wouldn't die with him. James Thornton knew he was dying, and worse, he knew he was being helped along. There were no scars, no bruises, no single moment to point to, just a slow, crawling horror building in his gut. The doctors couldn't explain it. His friends stopped checking in, and his wife, the one person who should have been fighting beside him, looked at him with sympathy that felt rehearsed. She still brought him tea every night, still hovered with a mother's concern, but there was something hollow in her voice now, something final. So James did the only thing he could. He started writing, a plain leather-bound journal, tucked away in the back of his closet behind old books and winter clothes. It was nothing special, just a safe place to scream when his voice failed. And scream he did. Each entry began the same, the date, the symptoms, and what he'd eaten that day. But as the days passed, the pages grew darker. "She watches me while I drink," he wrote. "I found something white at the bottom of the mug again. Every time I feel worse, it's after she's made my meals. If I die, please let someone read this." The handwriting began to shake over time. The lines slanted, the ink blurred, but the fear never wavered. It grew louder and sharper. He logged every reaction, vomiting, dizziness, the tremors, the insomnia. He even began hiding bits of food, stashing uneaten pills inside tissue paper and flushing them when she wasn't looking. But she was always watching. Vanessa adjusted every time he resisted. She started giving him supplements while he slept, claimed they were melatonin, just vitamins. "You'll feel better in the morning," she whispered, placing them on his tongue. He stopped arguing, and the next morning he wrote, "I didn't swallow them. I spit them out, but I'm still getting worse. She's doing something. I just don't know what." There was no one to show it to, no one who would believe a sick, fading man accusing the woman who spoon-fed him medicine. So the journal became his only ally, a map of his pain, a blueprint of her betrayal, a confession from a man not yet dead, but dying. He wrote until his hands wouldn't work properly. And even then he scrawled short, frantic lines. "This isn't natural. Please read this if I don't wake up. She's killing me." Then one morning, he collapsed. His legs gave out in the kitchen. Vanessa called 911, her voice shaking perfectly as she told the dispatcher, "He's not breathing, he just dropped. Please come quick." The audio of that call would later be played in court. Her panic sounded so real, so human. But James wasn't fooled. He had already written the truth. The ambulance arrived. He was rushed to the hospital. Vanessa sat beside him as the machines beeped and hissed. She held his hand, pressed her lips to his cheek, but he never opened his eyes again. James Thornton died 2 nights later. Cause organ failure from unknown causes. Vanessa wept for the doctors, for the friends, for community, but not for James. She had already moved on. The life insurance policy processed faster than expected. Owen was waiting. The plan was complete. She thought she had destroyed every trace of suspicion. She thought his voice had died with him, but she never found the journal. It remained hidden, silent, alive, and soon it would start to scream. Lily Thornton didn't cry at her father's funeral. Not because she wasn't heartbroken, but because something inside her refused to believe it had happened naturally. Her father hadn't been ill, not really. He had just started wasting away, little by little, like a shadow shrinking under a dying light. The doctor said organ failure. Everyone said it was tragic. But Lily, she felt it in her bones. Something was wrong. Her mother, Vanessa, was perfectly composed, tearful in public, stoic in private, efficient, cold. Within days, James's belongings began disappearing. His clothes packed up, his laptop wiped, his phone reset. Lily asked about his notebooks. Her father had always been a quiet thinker, always jotting things down, but Vanessa shrugged. Nothing worth keeping, she said. He burned most of it for privacy. Lily didn't believe her. Something in her mother's voice was too clean, too practiced. So that night, while Vanessa slept, Lily crept into their bedroom. She opened drawers slowly, careful not to make a sound. One was empty. Another held old receipts. But the third held something wrapped in a towel, tucked behind old documents. She opened it, and her breath caught in her throat. It was his journal. Her father's handwriting danced across the pages. Shaky but familiar. She sat down on the bedroom floor and began to read. At first, it was confusion. Medical notes. Symptom tracking. But soon it changed. She watches me eat. I think she's putting something in my tea. I don't know how to prove it, but I know she's behind this. Lily's stomach twisted. The pages were filled with fear, raw, pleading, terrified fear. Her father had suspected her mother. He had believed he was being poisoned. He had died trying to write his way to the truth. Lily's hands shook as she turned each page. And by the end of the journal, the entries were almost illegible. Please, if I die, it was an accident. That line stayed with her, echoed in her ears. She didn't sleep that night. She didn't tell her mother. The next morning, she packed the journal into her backpack, told Vanessa she would go to a friend's house, and walked straight into the local police station. She placed the journal on the counter and whispered, "I think my mom killed my dad." The officer blinked, then slowly picked up the journal. For the next few hours, Lily sat in a cold room with blank walls while officers read every word. At first, they were skeptical. Was this the imagination of a grieving girl? But then the details began to line up. Dates matching hospital visits. Descriptions matching symptoms of thallium poisoning. The calm, methodical tone of a man who knew he was dying. A man trying to leave behind the only weapon he had left, his truth. The police didn't make a scene. They opened the case quietly. They began pulling Vanessa's digital records, search history, purchase logs, text, browser caches. And what they found was damning. She had searched for undetectable poisons, for how to mimic organ failure, for how long it takes thallium to kill someone. She had used encrypted messages to speak to a man named Owen. Her affair, her accomplice, her motive, it was all there. Lily had lit the match. And now, the truth was catching fire. The investigation moved quickly, but silently. Authorities knew that if Vanessa Thornton caught wind of what was coming, she might run. And if she disappeared, the justice James deserved would vanish with her. So they worked in the background, gathering every piece of evidence, assembling the puzzle that James had left scattered in his final days. First came the toxicology. The original autopsy hadn't detected anything, but that was the point of thallium. It mimicked natural organ failure. It killed slowly, almost politely. But now, with the journal guiding them, The forensic team tested again, specifically for thallium, and this time, the results were conclusive. James's blood and hair samples showed clear signs of chronic thallium exposure. It wasn't a question anymore. He had been poisoned, methodically, over months. Next came the digital trail. Vanessa had tried to erase everything, but digital footprints are rarely clean. Investigators recovered deleted searches from an old device. Poison that looks like heart failure. How much thallium to kill? Insurance payout timeline after death. Then came the messages, dozens of them, hidden behind a fake account under the alias vmarie_04. She'd been communicating with Owen, her secret lover. And the messages weren't just romantic, they were tactical. He's getting weaker, we're almost there. Once the policy clears, I'll meet you in Atlanta. No one suspects a thing. Every message was like another nail in the coffin. Only this time, for her. Surveillance footage surfaced next. A quiet pharmacy 2 towns over. Vanessa, in sunglasses and a hoodie, picking up a suspicious compound registered under a fake lab name. The timestamp aligned exactly with the first spike in James's symptoms. When confronted with the evidence, the district attorney authorized the arrest immediately. Officers arrived at the Thornton residence just after dawn. Vanessa opened the door, still in her robe, sipping coffee. The same kind of cup James used to hold. She blinked when she saw the uniforms. They told her she was under arrest for the murder of her husband. Her expression didn't change, not right away. She just set the cup down, almost gently, and said, "This is ridiculous." But the lie had unraveled, and there was nothing left to stitch it back together. At the station, she refused to speak. Her lawyer claimed innocence. That James had been delusional, that the journal was the product of a paranoid mind poisoned by fear, not chemicals. But the science didn't lie, and neither did Lily. The moment Vanessa's mugshot hit the news, the town recoiled. Friends, neighbors, co-workers, all of them stunned. This was the woman who brought cupcakes to bake sales, who volunteered at church, who cried at her husband's funeral. And now, she was a woman accused of slowly murdering him for love, money, and freedom. But Lily didn't flinch. She stood behind her father's truth. She faced reporters with his journal clutched in her hand. She answered questions with quiet strength. "He knew," she said, "and no one listened. But I did." Vanessa was denied bail. The court date was set, and the whispers around town turned into headlines. Wife accused in cold-blooded poisoning. Daughter uncovers diary that solved her father's murder. The truth had unfolded, and it was uglier than anyone could imagine. But it was real, and now it was undeniable. James Thornton had been silenced with poison, but his words, buried in leather and ink, had screamed loud enough to bring his killer to her knees. The courtroom was heavy with silence the day the trial began. Cameras were banned, but every seat was filled. Reporters sat shoulder to shoulder beside teachers, neighbors, people who had once shared dinner with Vanessa Thornton and now watched her with narrowed eyes, wondering how many times they'd mistaken poison for grace. Vanessa sat at the defense table wearing beige, unemotional, unmoved, but her mask was wearing thin. No carefully curled hair, no curated social media smile, just a woman stripped of her armor, staring at the walls closing in around her. The prosecution didn't waste time. They laid it all bare: the journal, the search history, the forensic proof of thallium in James's blood, the text to Owen, the footage from the pharmacy. And when they read James's words aloud in court, it was as if he had risen from the grave to speak for himself. "She watches me when I drink. If I die, this wasn't an accident. I think she's killing me." The words fell like hammers. The jury sat frozen. Some shook their heads in disbelief. But the strongest blow came when Lily took the stand. She was just 17, still fragile with grief, but steady. Her voice trembled when she spoke, but she didn't break. Not once. She told them about the moment she found the journal, about the night she stayed awake, reading her father's last desperate attempt to be heard, about the sickening realization that her mother, the woman who'd raised her, was capable of such betrayal. She looked Vanessa in the eye and said, "He trusted you, and you watched him die." The courtroom was silent. Not a cough, not a murmur, only the sound of one girl's heart breaking in public. The defense tried to twist the story, suggest James had been delusional, that Lily had misinterpreted the journal, that the search history meant nothing. But it was too late. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for only 5 hours. The verdict: guilty, first-degree murder, premeditated, calculated, ruthless. Vanessa didn't cry. She didn't speak. She simply stood as if the sentence hadn't just buried her future. Life without parole. No chance of freedom. The same kind of slow, silent sentence she had given James. Only now, the bars were real. Lily sat in the front row, gripping the journal with both hands. Not because she needed it anymore, but because it had saved her father's truth. After the sentencing, the world didn't forget. The story spread across headlines, podcasts, documentaries. The daughter who caught a killer. The diary that spoke from the grave. But Lily didn't care about the attention. She cared about the silence being broken. She kept the journal in a glass box, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that monsters don't always come crashing through doors. Sometimes, they whisper your name and tuck you into bed. She went on to speak at events, to help others spot the signs of silent abuse, to remind people that love is not supposed to kill you slowly. And in every speech, she held up the journal and said, "This is what saved us, his words, his truth." Because the most haunting part of all was how normal it had looked. The breakfast table, the wedding photos, the family dinners. Evil had worn a mother's smile and a wife's apron, and no one had noticed until James wrote it down. So now we ask you, those watching, those listening, would you recognize evil if it sat across from you at dinner? Would you believe the unthinkable if it lived in your own home? Share your thoughts below. Tell us what you believe. Because sometimes justice doesn't come with sirens. Sometimes it's written quietly in the margins of a dying man's journal. And if this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe for more chilling, true stories that peel back the mask and reveal what's hiding underneath. Until next time, trust your instincts, stay safe, and remember, love should never feel like slow poison.